Hey everybody.
Hey everybody.
Parenting during a pandemic. I never thought I would be
in our lifetime
doing this video.
No.
But it's so important, and what triggered this was a report out of Texas that child abuse has gone up significantly. And Tana and I were both horrified by that, and we thought we just absolutely have to do this video for you, and then we'll answer questions as we can. So it's on my Facebook page, on Tana's Instagram.
Sorry, I had a little delay. So we're doing a parenting during a pandemic. So yeah, it's been a little crazy for everybody. And yeah.
It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. You've been so busy. I've been busy.
Busy during a pandemic.
Right?
But we're going to talk about parenting, and I'm actually going to give you, we are going to give you 8 strategies on how to stay sane for yourself and to help them
Because they're having trouble being a little bit sane right now. I mean, they're acting a little different. I mean, I have noticed we have really, really good kids, and they behaved a little differently than I was, But then if you step back, it's like, well, yeah, this is a really weird time. People are behaving differently, right? So you have to understand where they're coming from and then react accordingly.
Well, it's a historic
Right.
time. We are all going to remember this for the rest of our lives. And, when we come out of this 2 months from now,
Right.
6 months, whatever it is, we just want to be proud of ourselves.
Right.
And we want to make sure it's a time that matters in their life in a good way rather than in a stressful
Well, and that they
or
learn
bad way.
something. Because we've had our 9/11, we've had our stressful times if you've lived 50 years or more on the planet.
Well, just growing up in your household was
Growing up in my household, right?
stressful.
But having cancer and being through 9/11, and we've had those opportunities to go, oh, okay, this is a really stressful thing, and figure out how to react. And the first time it happened for me, I didn't react very well, right? But they haven't had that yet. And so this is their sort of first time, and it's a big thing.
So when you think of parenting during a pandemic, step number 1 is you got to know what you want. What's the goal? I mean, I say this to my patients all the time. What's the goal?
Right.
What do you want as a parent, and what do you want for your children? And so as a parent, I want to be present, so important during this anxious time. I want to be present. I want to be kind. I want to be helpful. I want to be thoughtful, and I don't want to make it so easy they don't learn anything or they become too dependent. What do you want as a parent?
And so my goals through this are to really think about the big picture, to think about my relationship with them, bonding, teaching them to be responsible. Responsibility is my favorite word. You know that. So most of our people know the ability to respond. And taking responsibility for me is an empowering thing, because when I take responsibility, it makes me feel empowered so that I don't panic, right? So when things are going weird, I feel empowered and I don't panic then. And so teaching them that strategy, it's like, oh, you're scared right now. What can we do that will eliminate that feeling? What can we do to mitigate that feeling? That's one of the things. So, and that really helps me when I focus on that, because if I'm focused on my bonding with them, my relationship with them, and on teaching them, it's easier to let some of the little stuff go. I mean, come on, we're all trapped in a house together, right? And so our normal routines are messed up. It's easy to get really annoyed. And so focusing on your goal helps you to let stuff go easier, I think.
And then the second part of number 1 is so
we've got Germany on.
Know what you want, and then, well, what do you want for them? What kind of children do you want to raise? Do you want to raise entitled, spoiled children, children who blame, children who take no responsibility, or do you want to raise empowered children? So I want to raise children who feel good about themselves as part of a family, as part of society.
Right.
And I also want to raise honest, competent kids, because the more competent, what you've been doing lately is you've been really helping them be competent by helping you.
Well, when I
So when
noticed-
you think about what you want for Chloe or Alize or Amelie, what do you want for them?
So exactly what you said. I want them to not be entitled or spoiled, or because I don't want them thinking about just themselves during this thing. Because when people get scared, they get fearful. You know, the first weekend that this all happened, before everything really hit the fan, within a 2-hour period, I went to the grocery store, saw an elderly woman get pushed down and literally crack her skull open. There's blood everywhere. No one would get near her. So of course I went over and tried to help, and they wouldn't let me come near her and help. Just because of my trauma nurse training, I tend to jump into stuff like that. And so they're like, you need to stay back. And so they called 911. Thank God 911 was there, or I would have tried harder to like jump in. They were walking through the door. But I saw that happen. Fist fight at the gas station. Chloe ended up seeing a fist fight happen there. Went into the pharmacy, saw the pharmacist get threatened because they didn't have his medication, and saw a guy walk in and just lose it and start singing opera. And they tried to get him to stop, and he's like, "Can't I just sing?" And he just like lost it. And this is this is in a neighborhood where, people have this tendency to say nothing bad happens here because it's just a really nice place. And this is what I don't want our kids to do. I don't want them to have that attitude. Like one stressor happens and they lose it, and they start behaving in a way that later they're not going to be proud of. And what I sat them down and I said, look, they started to kind of freak out too when they saw everybody else freaking out initially. That first weekend, they started like, oh my God, what's happening? What do you mean we can't see our friends? We didn't do anything wrong. I mean, there was all this chaos. And so we sat them down and we had a really good family talk about it. And one of the things I said was, you don't get to control this. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not, you're in it. You're in it. But you do get to control how you behave. And at the end of this thing, you get to control what kind of person you were going through it. That's all you get to control right now, right? We get to control how we behave. We get to control the decisions we make right now.
So someone wants to know what you're drinking.
I've been drinking it every day. I'm like not kidding about building my immunity right now. So this is like
So
really.
as someone who's had cancer three
Right.
times, this is...
I'm not joking. So I'd been a little bit complacent after having a hysterectomy, and this really like lit a fire under me. So
what is that?
This is lemon water with ginger, cayenne, and 1 teaspoon of manuka honey. It's supposed to build your immunity and your fight allergies and yeah. So.
All right. So step number 1 is know what you want for yourself and for your children. Really important. And then whenever you go to say anything, whenever you go to do anything, you just ask yourself, does it fit? Does it fit the goals I have as a parent? And does it fit the goal I have for the children? Mm-hmm. So step number 1, what do you want? Does your behavior get you what you want? Mm-hmm. Step number 2, bonding. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not, I wrote this book a long time ago called Healing the Hardware of the Soul. And in it, there's a chapter I love. How to make your child a Democrat, a Republican, or anything you want. And do you know how to do that? This is where the whole lecture here is you bond with them. If you're bonded to your children, they're going to pick your values. If you're not bonded to your children, they will pick the opposite of your values. Mm-hmm. So 1972, I turned 18, and I was not bonded with my dad. He and I were sort of like this the whole time. I mean, I really never saw him unless I went to work, and then, work, he wasn't my dad, he was my boss, and it wasn't good. And so, presidential election, I told him I was going to vote for McGovern, and he said if I voted for McGovern, the country would go to hell. The country did go to hell, but had nothing to do with McGovern. But it was the lack of bonding, which is why initially I didn't pick his values. But if you want to influence your children, you first have to have a relationship with them. And bonding requires 2 things. Time.
Which you have a lot of right now.
Actual physical time. and listening. If you're talking over your kids, if you're telling them how to think, if you're not listening to them, you will not have a relationship with them. So I have an exercise I love, developed it 3 decades ago, called Special Time. 20 minutes a day. Do something with each of the children that the kids want to do. And during that time, no questions, no directions, no criticism. Just listen during that time. 20 minutes a day, special time, changes relationships.
Well, and right now we have so much extra time. It's funny, I don't have a lot of time as far as I'm busy, right? I'm bleaching floors, I'm cooking everything by hand because, start from scratch. And actually it's been challenging because they don't have your normal ingredients, but it's also been fun because we've been improvising with everything and we've come up with some really cool stuff, and I've gotten the kids involved so they now have ownership of like the kitchen and getting them involved and spending time. But during all of those things, I'm getting them involved and teaching them to take responsibility, not only for their health, but their community. And so that's a really important thing, is taking responsibility, not just for you, but thinking more global than that, thinking bigger than that. So we are all in this together and we need to think like that. And so spending that time, and especially we've got our 2 nieces here, the little one is just amazing. She's my shadow. So we've used this as a time to go through all of I'm sort of a freak about preparing for crisis. And so
it's called prepper.
Yeah. So I'm one of those people.
She's a super prepper.
And I always get all this, people always give me flack because they're like, oh, nothing ever bad happens here. You're crazy. You're spending all this money. And I'm like, I'm not going to say I told you so, but a thank you would be nice. So I've been prepping for all this time. So what I did because they were nervous about what was happening, I had the little one, and now the older one wants to do it. My older niece wants to do it. Go through with me and make inventory lists. I showed them where everything is, all the medical supplies, the food, the tools. I showed them how all the emergency shut off, like the electricity, gas, water, went through everything with them. Where all the purifying stuff is. I have everything. It's crazy. But it made them happy because now they got to see, oh, we're going to be okay, 1. And number 2, it gave them something to do and they were taking responsibility. It was amazing. So yeah, someone said medications. Yes. Meditation. Yes, meditation for sure. Prayer and meditation critical right now. So for sure, yes, because your mental health is just as important, if not more so right now than anything else to keep your immunity, to keep your system stable.
Well, mental hygiene is as important as
Yes,
washing
they're all important.
your hands. But time.
Yes.
And you're spending lots of time with them. But this exercise, special time, so good. 20 minutes a day, do something with them they want to do, and besides prepping. And during that time...
But they want to do it.
No commands, no questions, no direction. Because that's bonding. And then listening. And listening is basically, as soon as they say something, don't say something back. As soon as they say something, repeat back what you hear, and then begin to listen for the feelings behind what they are saying. And so if they say, oh, I'm so afraid, because you have CNN or Fox on the whole time, stop that. I'm so afraid. Don't go, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. What's the matter with you? We're all going to be okay. Don't do that. Go, oh, you're afraid. And let them talk it through, because if you just jump in, they won't tell you what they're thinking. I think one of the best things you've done over the years with Chloe is even when she'd say outrageous things, you didn't just judge and shut it down by telling her how to think. You'd let her talk.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened through this, she surprised me a lot with her initial reaction because we always called her our 45-year-old soccer mom, and all of a sudden she didn't sort of act like that in this case. She just got her driver's license. She just got her first job. Literally was supposed to start the weekend after we got all this news, right? And so she was pretty upset. And she's like, why is this happening? This isn't fair. And they know not to say it isn't fair to me because I'm like, fair is a place with bad food and farm animals. It has nothing to do with life. So, but in this case, I didn't really jump in and say that. I really tried to listen because she wasn't acting like herself. She was acting different. And so we tried to listen, and I'm like, I'm a little surprised by her reaction because usually she's very much a caretaker. She's very maternal. And so she wasn't being that way, and she was resisting and pushing back a little bit. So I listened, and then because we listened, She was able to work through it. And she said something so interesting. She came to me the next day. She's like, all right, I get it now. It took me time, but I understand now. And I said, what's that? She said, I figured out what it is. She said, I've never been in trouble. I've never been on restriction, because we use something called love and logic, where we let them pay logical consequences. So restriction with my daughter doesn't really work that well. Letting her pay consequences for her, like natural consequences for her actions, is very, very effective. She hates it. So she's like, I've never been told I can't really do something. I've never been told I'm on restriction. And all of a sudden I didn't do anything wrong. And my entire life is like shut down. And I just got my license and I just got a job. And she's like, it felt to me, even though I knew logically it wasn't rational, it felt like it was you guys telling me that. She's like, I knew it wasn't right, but it felt like I was being told by my parents, you know, you can't do this stuff. You're on restriction. And she goes, I just had to process it. I just needed some time to process it. And she's like, and then when I finally did get it, and it reminded me of when I was told I had cancer. I like didn't get it. They told me I had cancer, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to come back in a few months. I'm busy right now. But no, I literally said that. They told me it was a slow growing cancer. So I'm like, okay, well, I've got a few months then. I'll be back in a few months. I'll see you then. And he's like, you're not really understanding what I'm saying. And then when he finally got it through to me that what he was saying, I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And I got really angry. And that's what she did. She was like, no, I'm not doing this. And she reminded me so much of, it was a very similar reaction to being given very bad news. So why would I get mad at her for that? I want to help her process that, right?
But it's because you listened that she was able to talk herself through. If you would have just been angry and told her how to think, then it would have just engendered bitterness.
Right. Now, there was one point, we had that really great talk, but there was one point where she pushed back a little bit. And I said, look, I'm doing my best to be sensitive, but let's be clear about one thing. Me being sensitive is secondary to everyone being safe. So let me be very clear.
We're going to get to boundaries. Boundaries come up, but bonding is so important to parenting. And we'll talk about discipline, but we're not talking about it till later. When I teach parent training, it's later. The first thing, know what you want, number one. Number two, it's bonding, which requires time and listening. So active listening, you can look it up on the internet or read some of my books. It's in Feel Better Fast. Listening is so critical and important. Third thing, rules. You gotta have rules. Society has rules. Families should have rules.
And some people don't like that word. I don't care what you call it, structure, boundaries, whatever you want to call it that. But especially when we're all in a house together, jammed in here together, it's like we have to function with, some set of, some structure, some normalcy, right? So that we don't step on each other.
And don't have 100 of them. I had an OCD patient once, an obsessive compulsive disorder patient. She had 108 rules. She had them all posted on the reverse. No more than 8. But it gives a structure. Things like tell the truth.
Right.
Now, if it's a rule, you got to follow it too, because if you don't, children do what you do, not what you tell them to do. So if somebody calls and go, tell them I'm not home, well, you're not following the rules.
You're lying.
But I like, tell the truth, do what mom and dad say the first time. Love that rule. Because when they don't, rather than you repeat yourself, did you know, if a parent repeats themselves more than 5 times, their chance of abusing that child goes way up.
Oh, I can see why. It's frustrating. I mean, it's not appropriate.
Right.
It's not
So,
okay.
Do this. And if they don't, it's like, well, what's the rule? And if they don't go do it then there's a consequence. And you train people when to comply and when not to comply.
Right.
Put away things you take out. And one of my favorite ones is we treat each other with respect. And so is that respectful? Which means you have to treat your wife or your husband with respect. Otherwise, you're just not modeling something that you're going to be proud of.
Right. And so this is where that would fit in when I told Chloe, when she was pushed back just a little bit, because it's a hard time. And I said, look, I'm going to be sensitive to how you feel. And that comes secondary to everybody being safe. So, as sensitive as I am to how you feel, it doesn't matter. This is what's going to happen. Because now, normally I may not come down that hard, but it's critical right now. Right now, I said, and this is what I said, because love and logic is about them paying natural consequences. It's like, okay, you do something stupid, you get to pay the consequences. That's fine when the consequences only affect you. When the consequences affect your entire family, your community, your grandparents, no, it's a little different. So now parents, now I'm going to step in, right?
And so that's where rules and structure can be so important. And then what you don't like. Mm-hmm. Notice what you like more than what you don't like. You train people how to treat you. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, you train them by what you accept and what you notice. Mm-hmm. And so I collect penguins. You actually see one on my top shelf. Why? Because, the model for me growing up, no one was noticing what they liked. I'm one of 7 children, and my mom's awesome, and my dad's awesome, but he only noticed what I did wrong. Mm-hmm. And we did not have a close relationship. And I wanted to do better, but my oldest, who I adopted, he was hard for me. And he just pushed back on virtually everything I said. He would have fit the criteria for oppositional defiant disorder. It's like, how many times out of 10, when you ask a child to do something, will they do it the first time without arguing or fussing with you? And the answer is less than 3, then they usually have oppositional defiant disorder. And so I was in a child psychiatry fellow at the time, which means I'm in training. I don't know anything about being a child psychiatrist. I'm learning about it. And my supervisor said, you're not spending enough time with them, and you have to notice what you like more than what you don't. And then what I did is I took him to a place called Sea Life Park in Hawaii. That's where I was living at the time. Loved it.
Sounds rough, yeah.
Loved it. And it was just he and I that day, and we went, Sea Life Park, sort of like Marine World or Sea World, and they had sea animal shows. We went to the whale show, and that was awesome, and then we went to the dolphin show, and that was cool, and then the sea lion show, and at the end of the day, we went to the penguin show. And the penguin's name was Fat Freddy, and Freddy was really cool. He comes out, he climbs up a diving board that's like 20 feet in the air, goes to the end, there's a diving board. He bounces on the diving board, and then he jumps in the water. And I hold my arm around my son, I'm like, so cool. And then he gets out of the water, and he bowls with his nose, he counts with his flippers, he jumps through a rope of fire, and I'm like mesmerized with it. And then the trainer asked Freddie to go get something. Freddie goes and gets it, and he brings it right back. And in my mind, I went, damn, I asked this kid to get something for me, and he wants to have a discussion for like 20 minutes. And then he doesn't want to do what I asked him to do. And I knew my son was smarter than the penguin. And so I went up to the trainer afterwards, and I said, how'd you get Freddie to do all these really cool things? And she said, unlike parents, whenever Freddie does anything like what I want him to do, I notice him. I give him a hug, and I give him a fish. And the light went on in my head that even though my son didn't like raw fish, now Chloe likes raw fish.
Raw fish.
It's another story. But even though my son didn't like raw fish, what I realized is I was paying attention to him when he was doing wrong things rather than when he was doing right things.
Right.
So I collect penguins as a way to remind myself to notice the good things about the people in my life more than the bad things. Mm-hmm. What do you think Freddie would have done? Let's just say Freddie was having a bad day, and the trainer asked him to go get something, and he didn't do it. Well, what do you think Freddie would have done if the trainer would have gotten a big stick and started beating the penguin? He would have never performed for her again because he would not have trusted her. Do not be beating children. That is not smart. It's not helpful. It's not going to develop the kind of person that you want. This is so important for us to do the right things. Discipline, really important. We're going to talk about that. I love Love and Logic. We'll talk about that. Notice what you like more than what you don't like. Mm-hmm. And so a smile, a hug, allowance, whatever you can do to notice their good behavior, you're more likely to get good behavior back.
Right, I agree. Yeah, and I mean, I just don't know what else.
So how do you notice the girl's good behavior?
I mean, it's kind of not a fair question because we have really good kids. So we're really lucky, especially in a time like this. They really do try to be helpful. Even, I mean, one thing, we are on top of each other, so there needs to be a little more grace than usual, and I think we're going to talk about that as one of the things. But mostly everybody's trying to help, and by getting them involved, it makes it really easy. Having them involved in everything we're doing makes it really easy to encourage them, notice what they're doing. It's not really hard with them, so I'm not sure it's fair. But you still have to notice it.
I notice them.
Yeah, you
all
still
the
have to
time.
notice it. You still have to verbally say it out loud to them.
Yeah.
So
it's a hug.
Right.
It's a smile.
Thank you. That was awesome.
thank
That was so
you.
helpful.
It's a bonus for their allowance because
Well,
they
and
work
here's
hard.
one way. We have very clear things, especially right now, expectations. Like Chloe helps make dinner. She's the oldest one, so she helps make dinner. The others help, but they're not, doing it entirely on their own. But they each have their own thing. Everybody's helping with certain things, dishes and, cleaning and all that stuff.
And don't make dinner and then you do all the dishes.
No, we do it together.
We do it together as a family. And sometimes they'll try and sneak off and
We're like,
grab
"No."
them because it not only goes faster, but then they become competent in cooking. And so
Right.
you're great at doing that. They become competent at keeping it clean, which
But-
is important during a pandemic.
So one of the things that I would say about this topic is just because it's their chores and it's expected doesn't mean you still can't thank them and tell them they did a great job. So it's not like, well, you were supposed to do that, so why, so I still...
That was my dad's attitude.
Yeah, no. So even though it's their chore, even though
It's
they
like,
know...
You get paid for going to work, so why do I have to tell you did a good job?
I still tell them they did a good job. I still say thank you. That's really helpful to the family. Like, I still, encourage that because it makes them want to do it.
Okay, so know what you want. Bonding, critical, rules, structure. Notice what you like more than what you don't like. And then comes discipline. So once you've done all those things, because if you start with timeout, it's not very effective. You need to lay a foundation of a relationship in order to effectively parent during a pandemic. And if you've not been good at those things, take some time to work on these before you come down on people. And discipline is not yelling, it's not screaming, it's not hitting. Those are things that are not going to get you your goals for yourself as a parent or in raising healthy people.
Right. I agree.
And so we came across a program that literally saved my daughter's life. It's called
Saved my
Love and Logic.
relationship with her for sure. And probably saved... She was not an easy child. Chloe was not an easy little child. Daniel used to say she was either going to be the leader of a gang or the leader of the free world. We weren't sure which one. But she was going to lead something. It was very challenging. And so she and I just butted heads like crazy when she was 4 or 5. It was awful. And then one day I broke down. I literally broke down and burst into tears. And I started praying and I'm like, it's not supposed to be this hard. It's just not supposed to be this hard. And I'm a trauma nurse. I'm like, I can handle, people bleeding out in trauma unit and people with their head, gunshot wound to the head. And I can't handle a 5-year-old. Are you kidding me right now? So I started praying about it, and several people within the same month, which I don't believe in coincidence, said to me, have you heard of this program? And so I got this program, and it was just exactly like it says. It's just very logical. And I was like, duh, light bulb moment. I'm very intense and authoritative. I'm an ICU nurse, right? So I'm like, that's not working with a very intense, strong-willed child. Our personalities were just like clashing big time. So by me learning how to sort of back off, let her make mistakes, let her fall, I wanted to tell her what to do and not let her make mistakes. That wasn't working. So as soon as I started learning to let go a little bit, be very clear about what the consequences were going to be, and then let it go. Let her fall, let her make the mistakes, let her pay the consequence. She learned really quick she hated consequences. I mean, like, she really hated consequences. So it was transformative.
So we have two examples. One, homework time used to be very stressful, and now it's not stressful at all. And she was in second grade?
Second grade. And so it was just every night was a battle. She would not sit down to do a reading. She wouldn't sit down to do her, whatever her homework was, her little math problems. And we had to fight over it. And I somehow had thought that this was my responsibility. And one day I went to her and I said, sweetie, I love you so much. I hate fighting with you. I'm not going to fight with you anymore. You don't have to do homework ever again. If you don't want to do homework ever again, you don't have to do it. And she was like, she sits there and she looks at me. She's up on the stool. She goes, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make any sense. And I said, no, I'm serious. I'm not going to tell you you have to do your homework ever again. So if you're okay with the consequences of not doing your homework, I'm okay with it. Let me know if you want to know what those are. If you're ever curious to know what the consequences are, I'm here. Let me know. And so she was like, this doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? I said, well, staying inside at recess and lunch probably is what's going to happen if you keep not turning your homework in. You're going to disappoint your teacher, which she hated disappointing her teacher. She loved her teacher. And I said, but the thing is, I said, you're so cute and, you're pretty funny. It's going to be easy for you to make new friends next year when all of your friends move on to third grade. You're going to repeat second grade, but that's okay because you'll make friends easily. She got so mad. She threw her pencil down, jumps off the stool. She goes, I never said I wasn't going to do it. I'm just not doing it right this second. I never said a word. She walked out of the room. She came back 20 minutes later, got in that chair, did her homework, and never asked me for help. So over the years...
And she's in 11th grade again.
And she is doing AP and honors classes, and she's amazing. So she's amazing. So
that is a logical consequence to not doing something that you're supposed to do.
Right.
Now, the other example is we were going to take her to a special premiere in Los Angeles, and she was just acting badly.
Worst temper tantrum she's ever thrown in her life. Ever, to this day. Worst temper tantrum she's ever thrown. It was awful. And so she'd never been left with a babysitter because of some of my own weird issues with babysitters. Just a thing I have. And
Trauma.
Yeah. So I never left her with a babysitter. We can call it that. But this time I knew I had to do something, and so I thought about it. And so one of the things Love and Logic tells you to do is buy yourself time. Don't make any decisions in the heat of the moment when you're angry, because that's when we make bad decisions.
Don't discipline when you're angry.
Right. You don't need to tell them right then what's going to happen. You don't need to do that.
In fact, you say, what's the comment?
I'll let you know after I think about it.
After I think about it. There's going to be a consequence. I'll let you know.
Right. You don't need to do that right then. So thank God she threw herself onto a rug, and we have hardwood floors, and I dragged the rug down to her room, and I was so mad. I said, I think it's in your best interest to stay in this room right now. And she didn't say a word. She stayed there. She knew it was bad. And she'd grab my face. And so I put her in a room, and I left the room, and I'm like, I need to think of what to do. So I thought, it's time for me to let someone come over and watch her. And I called someone that I knew, that I trusted. And I said, can you show up quickly, last minute? She showed up at the house. Now, in Chloe's mind, she's never had a babysitter, so she didn't understand what was happening. And so all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, she comes out. She's completely fine. She's all well adjusted. And she's like, okay, I feel better, Mom. And I'm like, good, I'm happy about that. And I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word about what she had done. Doorbell rings. She runs downstairs. She sees the person. She knows who it is. She's like, oh, are you going with us? She just was confused why they were there. And the girl looked at her, she's like, what? And I looked before Chloe could say another word. I handed the girl a list, and I said, these are her chores. This is her homework. After she finishes her chores and her homework, then you guys can do something fun if you want to, but she needs to get all of this done first. I looked at Chloe, and I said, sweetheart, I said, I'll give you an advance on next week's allowance if you don't have enough of your allowance to pay her. And if you still don't have enough, she takes toys for payment. Chloe started to scream, "This is all your fault." I mean, she started going crazy. And I'm like, well, you have all day to think about that. And I walked out the door. And that was it. And I made her pay for the babysitter.
So the
Never happened
consequence
again.
was not taking her to the things she
And making
wanted
her pay for the
to go,
babysitter.
and making her pay. That's a logical, loving, love and logic. It's a loving, logical consequence.
Yeah.
I don't want you screaming. I don't want you yelling. I don't want you hitting. What I want you to do is thinking, what is the consequence of this behavior? Now, it starts with goals and bonding and rules and noticing what you like. Those are critical foundational things. And then what's the logical consequence to this behavior?
Right.
And sometimes it's timeout, and timeout can work, and I have rules. Timeout starts when you're quiet. Don't send someone to their room and let them scream at you. So time starts when you're quiet. But basically it's timeout from things that they like, whether it's video games, which are not good for them anyways, or you just want to make an impact. But ultimately, discipline comes from the Greek word disciple, which basically means to teach.
Right.
Use it as teaching.
So one of the things that's also been helping us, our kids have actually been getting less screen time recently. I mean, the first couple of days, probably everyone was freaked out. They might have been on their phones a lot, but now they actually don't have a lot of screen time. One of the things that's been helping to keep their stress down and keep them involved, we have them exercising. I've got them doing yoga while I work out, using YouTube videos, and then we have them working out like every day and doing something. And so by having
People become more cooperative after they work out.
Yes, they feel better. Their stress is lower. So like me, I have a gym in the house because I've been collecting that equipment for 20 years because I'm not into purses. I could care less about purses. I care about survival equipment and exercise equipment. Those are my things. It's critical for me.
And we did a whole podcast. Actually, we've done a couple on love and logic with Jim Fay. Somebody on my channel mentioned Jim Fay. And if you go to Brain Warriors Way Podcast, brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, we've done like 600 of them. They have about 7 million downloads. You can listen to all the ones with Jim. Jim is just awesome.
Yeah.
And get love and logic if you're really struggling. And what I've been thinking about is during a pandemic, this is the time to get healthy. It's the time to get physically healthy,
absolutely.
mentally healthy. It's the time to get your relationship right with your children rather than just doing the, stress
Reaction.
thing,
Don't do the
reacting
reaction.
in your head. Okay, so we have know what you want, bonding, clear rules, notice what you like more than what you don't, discipline, clear, quick, unemotional consequences that are logical to the situation. 6 is supervision. You need to know where they are, what they're doing, especially during a pandemic, because kids can carry it, may not show a lot of symptoms, but then give it to you and you might give it to your parents. This is not a good thing. So supervision is critical.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I have my whole family on Life 360. It's the app where you can see where everybody's at. And so, everyone teases me that the NSA has got nothing on me, and that's okay. I don't care. It's probably true. But the bottom line is, it actually allows me, in a normal circumstance, not right now, but in normal circumstances, it allows me to give them more freedom, because when I'm able to see where they're at and and they answer me when I text them, it's like that gives me that peace of mind to know that they're safe, that, that kind of thing. And it's got crash detection now. So for the 16-year-old, those types of things. And I explained that to them. I'm like, look, you might feel like it's invasive, but let me tell you something. You're going to have a lot more restrictions if I didn't have that. So figure it out, but that's the way it is. So
supervision, know where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. And more important, and you're going to go, oh, but my kids won't like that. Well, let me tell you the truth. They won't like that. And they will hate it if you don't care. And so that is really important. Supervision. we want you to be their frontal lobes until theirs develop. And quite frankly, the frontal lobe isn't finished developing until they're in their mid-20s. So having a good relationship and supervising them, really important.
So one of my nieces said to me the other day, she said something that made me almost cry. She was telling me, we were talking about, I told you guys I always, I believe mentors. We were just talking about stuff in life and what's good, and we were talking about that kind of thing. And she looked at me and she said, well, you're my mentor. And she goes, you're my role model. And I was like, what? Oh. And she said, I want to model myself after you. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So we started talking about it, and here's what it boiled down to. She said, you make me feel safe. She's like, you just always seem to know what to do in a crisis, and you make me feel safe. And she doesn't mind the rules. She actually said, I don't mind the rules.
Well, but her brain is wired like that, to like them, like yours.
Even though she pushed back at first. No, she pushed back at first. And she said, and I still like them.
So supervision is critical, and then grace and forgiveness. Mm-hmm. We all make mistakes. You make mistakes as a parent. If you're like me, you made lots of mistakes when you were a kid. Grace and forgiveness is just so important. Odds are people are doing the best they can. And if you, and there's actually a forgiveness method I wrote about in my book, Feel Better Fast. It's called the REACH method of forgiveness. So take an incident, recall what happened, empathize with the person. What was going on in their head? They're freaked out by what's going on with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Altruistically, that's the A, give the gift of forgiveness. Commit to it, tell someone about it, and then hold on to it. This method has been studied and found to be very effective to help people let things go. Because when you hold on to a hurt, who do you think it's poisoning more than anyone else? It's you.
Yeah. No, when you don't forgive, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Yeah.
That's not rational.
Right. And I like what you said about grace, because right now we're on top of everybody. We're in each other's face. We're like, we don't have a choice. And so there's going to be moments you hurt each other's feelings. It's going to happen. So we actually talked about it in advance. We're like, look, we know we're going to try and limit it, but it's going to happen. So just know that it's going to happen. Be kind about it, and just understand. It's like, we know that the people in our house, it's like, if you say something that bugs me, and I certainly say things that bug you, it's like, but I know that your intention is always good. I know your intention is to love us, to protect us, to help us. So even if you say something that bugs me, it's like, all right, but I know that he loves me, and I know his intention is good, right? Because we can't go out and do our normal stuff.
And the last step, and you were sort of bringing this up, is mentoring. It's how do you want them? This is not going to be the end of the world, nor is it going to be the end of a crisis in society. Wars are going to happen. More pandemics are going to happen. You want to mentor them through, and how you do that is by modeling being okay during this time. Is not believe every stupid thing you think. We're going to do, actually, Amelie and I are going to read my book, Captain Snout and the Superpower Questions, probably later today. We're going to read that because it teaches kids to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts, automatic negative thoughts that steal their happiness. So you should tune in as well, because it's a skill that is just absolutely essential for you to know about how to kill the ants, because they're just crawling everywhere. And part of that is you need to turn off the news. I mean, like, listen to it 20 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, and then stop.
Right, we
because
listen to what
otherwise
we need to listen to.
It's just going to flood you with ants and negativity, and then you're going to be infested and afraid, and you'll get to the hysteria that you talked about earlier from people fighting at the gas station. And now, so what happened? Gas is cheaper now than it has been in years.
We haven't run out of
and
food.
it's widely available. And
We haven't run out of gas.
a
We
friend
haven't
of
run out
mine
of
was
food.
at the store this morning. She said everything was stocked. Now, I know it depends on where you are. I mean, there are people from Germany and Italy and all of that. I know it depends. And I always love what you say. Compared to what?
Compared to what? And focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. So I will admit to this. There's been plenty of food. There hasn't been the convenience to go get what I want, to get the things I normally get. So we've had to be really creative, right? There's been a lot of times I've gone to the grocery store, I'm like, I have no idea what to do with turnips, but there's turnips, so we're eating turnips, right? There's plenty of food. It's just not what I would normally make. So I'm making a lot of weird stuff, and so far, everyone's loved it. I've gotten them involved in the kitchen. We just have to be sort of creative.
We love the process. We love the relationship. And she's actually a really great cook.
You never thought you'd say that.
I never thought I'd say that. When I first met her, she couldn't cook. I actually prayed she wouldn't cook. She was such a disaster. And now she's a master. And so we hope this has helped you. Leave a comment, leave a question. Also check out our podcast, Brain Warriors Way podcast.com. We'll be here for you. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.